Hey, Carol, we're going to give a shout out to listener Marissa, who is actually growing her own flowers for her wedding decorations and her bouquet this spring. Are you impressed?
I am very impressed and very good for her. Those flowers will be so much more special because she grew them herself.
So, we want to wish Marissa and her fiance a happy Valentine's Day and a happy life.
Indeed.
Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden an acre and a half on 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love it, and we want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. I feel like I haven't talked to you all week, other than we've texted back and forth because
That
we
is
haven't
true.
talked, right?
That is true.
But it was a big texting week, wasn't it?
It was.
We had a lot to talk about, and a lot of it's in this episode. So I want to hear about your garden update, and I want to hear about this phone call.
So my sister called me the other night, laughing hysterically. She had just listened to our episode where we made fun of the Stanley Cups to
Yeah.
confess that she has a Stanley Cup and she has a topper for the straw. And I think her granddaughter was involved in helping her pick this thing out. So that was
Of course she
hilarious.
was. That was hilarious.
She's a year younger than me. And then we talked about clackers in that episode, those toys that were like two balls on. So if you knew this sister, she's not one to keep all kinds of stuff, but she has her clackers from when we were teenagers.
Oh my gosh, she needs to take a picture of those for us because needs what
Yes.
clackers are. Nobody,
Yeah.
right?
Nobody. I'll get her to take a picture someday and then we'll just pop it out there and say, hey, remember when we talked about clackers?
Yeah, we
Anyway,
can just put it on our story. So what did you do in the garden?
so this week I've spent more time in the garden than I did the entire month of January, understandably. Beautiful weather,
Yep.
at least warmer. It wasn't always as sunny. But I winter sowed 15-gallon jugs of seeds out there. Can I have a round
Mhm.
of applause?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I
Thank
got
you.
distracted
Thank
by
you.
how cloudy it is outside here. Okay, but
Anyway.
yes, you get applause because 15 containers is a lot.
And then I weeded out chickweed and creeping Charlie in this one bed because it's going amok. And
Yeah.
I cut back all the hellebores, this is about the earliest I've ever cut them back. Sowed more seeds for microgreens, harvested some microgreens. And then, when it starts to get warm like this, we gardeners get sort of antsy and panicky. Like, oh, there's not going to be time. There's going to be plenty of
Yeah.
time.
There's plenty of time and there's going to be more bad weather. So just hang on to your trowels.
Yes, it's coming after tomorrow.
Yeah, here
Yes.
too. We got snow coming. Ugh.
Oh, yeah, probably here too. I cut back some grasses and some seed heads of the heucheras in front because
Mhm.
the crocuses are coming up and I want it to be nice and people to see those and not think, when's that woman going to cut that stuff back? Anyway, that was my week in the garden.
But you also you should say that your crocuses have been popping up like little gumballs in your
Yeah, the back lawn is always a week ahead of the front and I do not know why, but that's just going gangbusters. And then the first ones have popped up in the front and that will be going gangbusters, but they're a little bit later. So we shall see.
So I spent more time in the garden this week too, and I cleaned all my front beds in my front garden in front of my house. I have not cleaned out my two pots yet, but I'll do that soon. I cut back all of the hellebores so that they would be ready to show off their little blooms. And there's two schools of thought about hellebores. Some people don't cut them back, but I cut them back because I want to see the flowers. And then they grow new leaves and it's all good. But sometimes if you get some cold weather, it'll, smudge your leaves. It'll burn your leaves when they're new, but whatever. And then I need to kind of mulch that bed. I haven't done that yet, but I will. And then in the back, along the retaining wall, I cut back a bunch of like big shrubs and stuff that had gotten too
Right.
tall. I cut them in half because I know that they'll be fine. Some of them are roses of Sharon, and it had gotten to where the blooms were way above my head, so I couldn't see them, which is the point of seeing them, right? So I cut those
Right.
back, and I cut back my smoke bushes because I don't want them to smoke. I want them to just be purple. So I cut back those, cut back some grasses, perennial grasses, and then I still need to do the hellebores in the backyard, but I haven't done that yet. And then I went because that was all hard work. I decided to do some easier work, and I went and did a bunch of seeds in the greenhouse. And I don't know how many I sowed, but a lot. And I've got a lot more to do, but I had to go buy more containers because that's my favorite. So I'll tell you about that in the favorites. That's all I think.
Okay. Yeah. Remember my smoke bushes? I had the tree guys cut them I said, just whack them to the ground. Let's see what comes up.
And what happened? Did they come up and just look
Well,
good?
we don't know yet. They
Oh,
haven't.
that's
It's
for
spring.
next. Okay. I couldn't remember if you did that before or yeah.
No,
Okay.
they
We'll
did
see.
that this fall. So we shall see. So let's play
Cool.
favorites.
Okay. Do you want me to do my favorite since I teased it?
I do.
Okay. So first, Ladybug, Jennifer, came over and she brought me some beautiful little plugs of some of her flowers, including Lysianthus. I'm so excited.
Oh my
I have
gosh.
never grown Lysianthus before, and it is one of the most beautiful cut flowers of all time. And so she had them in this little container. And I said, "What is that?" And she goes, "Oh, it's these burpee containers, and they're reusable seed trays, and you just pop them out, and then they're like plugs."
Yes.
They're awesome. They're made with silicone. They're really awesome. So I ran to Tractor Supply and bought more. And then that was the one in Guthrie. And then I ran to the Tractor Supply in Edmond and bought more because last year, finally, after years and years and years, my seed containers are all pooped out because I just have reused them till they're gone. And since I grow most of my stuff from seed now, I don't have, I don't get a bunch of stuff to bring in to start over with seed containers. So we're going to link to that, and it is an affiliate link, although this is not a sponsored post. It's just I love them, and they come in two sizes. One is 12 of, like 3-inch pots.
Uh-huh.
And the other one is like, I think 18 of the little ones, or maybe even more than that. It might be 20 something. I don't know. Anyway, they're fabulous. And so you can find them on Amazon right now.
I'm
and
looking
they're
at
priced
them.
about the same.
36 cell reusable seed starter tray is $11.49. And you think, oh, that's a lot of money. But if you think about how many years you can use that and compare that to,
Oh, years.
I'm getting me some.
That's cheaper than they were at Tractor Supply. I paid $12.95 for them. And I think I bought 5. So I bought a total of 10. So I spent some good money on this, but they are something I will use forever. Also, Carol, they have little handles. So you can pull them up to dump the water tray underneath them.
Nice.
There's little handles on the side.
I see that.
Whoever designed these really, really put a lot of effort into it. And then my first Aranthus flowered winter aconite, and I'll take a picture of them open for the newsletter or try to if it ever quits being cloudy. They kind of close on cloudy days. Tell me about your favorite thing.
Well, I'm going to say the winter aconites, everybody always talks about, okay, that's the first flower. Not here. For whatever reason, where I have them placed, they take their sweet time.
That's interesting.
So all the hyacinths on vase, they're almost all blooming, or they're kind of a staggered bloom. So it's not an overwhelming scent in my kitchen, but they're beautiful. They are all pink, which is kind of like, yeah, I didn't buy a mixed bag. So easy to force into bloom. I mean, I literally filled the vase, stuck it on top, done. And then
after your cold period, you did a cold period.
After the cold period in the refrigerator.
Be sure to tell people that.
Yes.
Right.
After about 10 weeks, I give or take
10 to 12.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then my Lego roses are all in full bloom, and they are glorious.
I want those Lego roses, but I bought seed trays, so I don't know. Anyway.
Well, I tried to put a reel on Instagram for the Lego roses, and it kicked it back and said, that I copyright violation or something, and it would never play in the United States. I'm like, well, that's weird. And then I did another reel,
that is weird.
And it kicked back too. And then I saw where a very popular Instagrammer commented that her reel had been kicked back. And so I think there's something going on with Instagram.
They have glitches all the time. One day, you'll look on there some days and all of your followers will go away and then they come back slowly. It's a
Anyway,
weird. I haven't had any reels kicked back. I have used their music that they suggest for my reels, which helps a little. But I did have one come back the other day that they said it was an old one. And they said, you used copyright music. And I was like, well, I used what you guys had on the
exactly.
site. Whatever.
Exactly. So that's what
Anyway,
mine
they're
came
just
anyway.
irritating.
But they are lovely. And so maybe I'll get a nice picture of them. I had actually, I don't know if I still have the reel. I could put it over on YouTube. Maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, you could.
All right, let's do a quote and talk about our flowers because you're very excited about our flower.
I am.
Opportunity dances with those already on the dance floor. And that's Jackson Brown Jr.
Love me some Jackson Brown. Listen to him all the
That's
time.
right.
Okay, so flowers. We're going to talk about Verbena bonariensis. Verbena bonariensis is often called verbena on a stick. It is called Brazilian verbena. It's called lollipop verbena. It has lots and lots of names. And this particular Verbena bonariensis is native to, I just gave it away,
Brazil.
Brazil. So before we get started, I know you put it down lower in the deal, but there was a big discussion on the Oklahoma Native Plant Society about whether these are invasive. I have never, ever seen them be invasive in my garden. I think sometimes because my garden's not that warm, even on the warmest day, I'm not in the city. So I think that's part of it. I would not even say it's aggressive in my garden. So I'm going to continue to plant it. But there are some options for natives if you want to do that, and we'll talk about that later. You wrote plants or seeds.
Yeah, I'm looking up. So the other common name, tall vervain, I'm looking it up and they show the deep south, quite a few areas where they say it's been reported outside of and then some areas of Northern California, it's not, I
I
really,
don't think it's
I really
invasive
don't
here.
think it's a big problem.
I don't either. So I'm going to continue to plant it because it is one of my favorite things in the summer garden. It is a good cut flower. It is a beautiful see-through flower. It is a beautiful tall flower. It requires almost no care. Butterflies love it. Bees love it. Everybody loves it.
Exactly.
And it's purple and it goes with everything. So just a great plant for your dry garden, in my opinion, dry.
And I like how you call it a see-through flower because you can put it out there and it kind of if the taller ones, they kind of hover over the rest of the flowers and you just see these little pops of purple everywhere. And it's very nice.
Oh, and I need to give a shout out to our friend Beth Teal because Beth is one of the ones who said, Dee, are you ever going to talk about all the new Verbena bonariensis out there? And I said, sure, we'll be glad to. So you wrote, I think the part about should you plant it directly outside or should you get plants or should you get seeds? I find the seeds extremely easy to sprout indoors or to winter sow. I don't think they're
They
hard.
are. No.
I would not put seeds directly in the garden unless we're at the end of the season and I've let my plants go to seed and I just sprinkle the seeds around, which I do. That works well, but then you have to be prepared to weed it out of wherever you don't want it. And it gets in my gravel paths, but then I just dig it out and stick it places.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about, let's talk about vanity, which I don't know, did you grow vanity last year? I did.
I've grown vanity several times and I'm going to grow it again this year. I got seeds again.
It is an All America Selections winner. It's more compact, typically grown as an annual because it's hardy to maybe zone 7 and higher. I planted it. I winter sowed it last year. The seeds were sent to me by All America Selections. Winter sowed it, got a lot of nice plants, put it out by the mailbox. It did fabulous. I thought it looked great right up until
it was pretty.
Frost.
Didn't you underplant it with a yellow flower? Was it marigolds?
Yes. I underplanted it with zinnias.
Oh, zinnias, the little short zinnias. Yeah.
The Zaharas, yes. And that was really lovely. And I also planted some up here in the, I guess, the desert created under the bird feeder where all that crap falls. I planted some kind of out to the edges. They did not do as well, but they're in a very harsh condition.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought earlier that it looked like it might be overwintering. And now I think after the last cold spell that it is a goner.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely grow it again.
So the ones in my paths, they're goners because that really long cold spell we had, they're like, okay, we just turned up our roots and gave it up. Vanity is shorter stems, compact habit. It's a little easier to maintain, but that makes it less of a see-through plant a little bit because it is shorter. It just depends on what you want. And I I love them. There's also we looked up some other varieties. The shortest one I know of is Lollipop. I have seen Lollipop in bloom because in 2015, it was one of the featured plants at California Spring Trials, which if I got to ever go do another trip like that where most of my expenses were paid except for my flight, I would jump on it in a heartbeat because I learned so much about propagation of plants. And Lollipop was brand new and now it's on the market and you can order it places and I've seen it a few places. It is pretty short. And then there's Finesse, which is a new one, and it is actually a registered trademark plant, which I suspect means that it is propagated by, what's the word? You know, by plant to plant.
Vegetatively.
Thank you. I couldn't think of the word.
Vegetatively.
Instead of being seeds. So I tend to grow vanity and the regular one. And then in pots, I love Bampton. Let's talk a bit about Bampton.
So Bampton, you got me all excited about Bampton.
Saw it in England.
I decided that I was going to try to grow it from seed. And
Good luck.
so I went out there and Nan Andra over at Hayfield has some Bamta seeds. So
Mhm.
I ordered from her and literally 5 minutes after I hit the order button, I had a nice email back from her
She's
and
lovely.
she wrote on her website that when she grew it after all the hype and everything, she said it was not very impressive until later in the season. And then suddenly it was beautiful. So it's one that requires some patience, as you said, both in seed sowing and in waiting for it to bloom. And she says on her website, and I might be misquoting her, but it does require a cold period to germinate.
And
And
darkness.
yeah, and so what I did, I don't know if it's ever going to work, but I just thought, you know what? I'm going to winter sow these and see what happens. And she said
Hmm.
that was something you could try on, try to winter sow it. So
So
I'm hopeful, but I
so
don't know.
if you're gonna grow Bampton, and I tried to sow it last year and I covered the seeds and I think they have to, I may be wrong, but I think that they had to be like on the surface of the soil, but also in darkness. So I put them in total darkness. They never germinated. So I ended up buying plants from Select Seeds and they have plants. Here's my other tip about Banton. Put it in a pot. Don't, it'll get lost in the landscape. It is a very short plant. And if you put it in a pot it is a good filler and it makes a skirt around whatever your thriller is. It is beautiful and you won't even need a spiller in that pot because people will stop and stare at it. And actually, people will pull the tags out of your pots on the tour because they want to know what that plant is. So it's a pretty cool plant here because it blooms a little earlier because, I'm in Oklahoma and it's warmer. About, I'd say mid to late summer, you need to cut it back all deadhead all, and then it'll bloom again for you. So it is worth growing. It is a beautiful plant. The butterflies loved it. The bees loved it. I loved it. I'm growing it
So
again
we
this
shall
year.
see. I I did not pay attention much to the darkness part. I just thought I'm going to put these on the
It
soil.
don't
I tamped it
matter.
down really good, stuck it outside, and it's like, you're either germinating or you're not germinating. And I'm just going to be patient. And if, I'm just going to be patient. That's all I'm going to
You could
say.
also just put gravel on it, and that would help with some, it not being able to be seen. But here's the thing, it's worth a try to do it and just see what happens. So, do you want to talk about the native Verbenas now?
Yes, I looked up the native verbenas. There are three
Thanks.
main native verbenas. We're going to link to Missouri Botanical Garden for American blue vervain, which is Verbena hastata, and hoary vervain, which is Verbena stricta. And then we'll link to the Ladybird Johnson Wildlife Center for Texas vervain, Verbena hallii. And I'm going to go from memory because I'm not clicking on those links. American blue vervain really likes a moist area.
Mm-hmm.
And hoary vervain can tolerate a dry area.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even pay attention to Texas vervain. It said Texas, and I thought, well, I'm probably not going to grow it here, but you might be able to grow it.
I've seen Verbena hastata. I don't know where I've seen it. I don't know if it was in my upper pasture or if it was at Bustani or if I saw it at somewhere else. Here's the thing. I am not growing that hoary vervain. I'm just not. It has green.
It's
leaves.
ugly.
That is so ugly. I'm not growing that. That's like a weed in my upper pasture, which it probably is there. Now all the native plant people are going to get on to me because I don't want to grow that ugly plant. But yes,
Let me
go
say
ahead.
this. I think these native verbenas don't look anything. They don't look anything like Verbena bonariensis.
No.
They're more of a spike flower.
Mm-hmm.
And so knock yourselves out. If that it's really important to you that these be native, then you're going to take Verbena bonariensis sadly off your list, unless you maybe are okay with a container plant, and put these on your list. But you are getting something that, in my opinion, looks very different.
Yeah, they look like Veronicas a little bit. The two that
Yes.
have purpley blue blooms. And that's okay if that's what you want. I will, unless they come for me. I don't want them to pry my cold dead hands away from my lollipop verbena.
So
I'm
here's the
sorry.
thing now. Here's the thing. We talked about Bampton being so beautiful in containers.
Mhm.
So my sister with the Stanley Cup, she used to be the sister who doesn't garden. Now she's the sister with the Stanley Cup, till I find out that another sister has a Stanley Cup. Anyway, she might listen to this and say, Carol, if you have any extra Bampton seeds, maybe I can do a container on my patio.
Yes, I like how
And I'm
she
like,
always does that. You just
yes.
let's get them up and growing. It is a slow grower and it has kind of weird foliage too. And when you first you first get it and you look at it, you go, that's not that cute. But you know what? I saw it in England and it's full glory. And so I was like, I'm having that plant. So yay, Verbena Bampton, Verbena Lollipop, Verbena Bonariensis, Verbena. I like verbenas.
We are going to end up with a lot of verbenas. We just tuck ourselves into it. And I'm like, ooh, should I have gotten some more seeds for vanity? Should I have gotten some? I need to check and see if the local greenhouse is going to have some lollipop. And anyway, why don't you do a quote and let's talk about vegetables
Okay.
before we get all going off to seed catalog sources again.
We tend to forget that baby steps will still move you forward.
Ooh.
Not sure who said that first. And the reason I wrote not sure who said that first is it was everywhere. And I never could figure out who was the person who said it, but I like it. But unfortunately, when we wrote it in there, it's love instead of move. So it threw me for a moment. Our vegetables are about our leafy plants and root crops for cold weather.
Yes. And people are like, oh, fast forward. Kale. Then people are thinking kale. Fast forward. Are we not over the kale phase of life? Everything was kale
I do
chips,
love
and putting
kale.
kale in your smoothie and kale on your salad and kale. So healthy for you.
I like the dark ones that are lanceolados. I like those, the dinosaur kales. But the one I grew, Black Beauty or whatever it was, it did great all winter until we had the cold spell and the cold frames, and I forgot to cover the cold frame. And so, stuff happens. It died. So I bought some more seeds to sow that were a different variety of the same thing. So I'm going to say that particular kale wasn't as hardy as some I have grown in the past. So you're growing one called Premier.
I'm growing one called Premier because when I went to Menards and I was buying burpee seeds, like
Mm-hmm.
a drunken sailor just arrived in port or something, that was the variety that they had. And I'm like, yeah, I'll grow some more kale. And then Dorothy, and I guess it's Giles instead of Giles. that
don't know.
wrote The Little Kitchen Garden.
Yes.
She recommended lancenato, which is, like you said, a dark curly
Dinosaur
leaf
kale.
kale.
Hmm.
So I actually went out and found that particular variety at a seed source and ordered it.
So the dinosaur kale, is better in soups and in stir fries. It is not as good for kale chips if you're still making those, which I don't think you made them in the first place. And
I never made a kale chip.
I did. I made them for a while. I'm over it. But anyway, I like lanceolato. I like it in various soups. It's good. I just add it at the end as a bit of green color so that I can pretend that I'm eating all my veggies that day. So next is spinach, and you and I agree on the spinach. We grow the same variety.
Bloomsdale Longstanding, which again, it was the burpees seeds that they had. And I
Famous
mean, that
heirloom.
is, yeah, everybody grows
Famous.
it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So it was really popular when I first started gardening a long, long time ago. Then it kind of fell out of favor with some people because when you grow it, it has very lumpy, bumpy leaves, right? So it would catch the dirt
Mm-hmm.
and sand and all that stuff. And so smooth leaf lettuce became much more popular. And that's what you get when you go to the store. You get little tiny smooth leaf lettuce in those
Yeah.
boxes. But
You mean
for,
spinach.
am I saying lettuce? I mean spinach.
You're
Spinach,
saying
spinach,
lettuce, you mean
spinach.
spinach.
Yeah. So I went back to Bloomsdale a few years ago because here's the thing, has a much meatier taste than other spinach. And it's just got more texture. And if you put it in stuff or you wilt it, it's just better. And it doesn't go down to nothing. You know what I mean? So it's just,
Yeah.
and it's tough. It's a really tough one. I am trying
Those smooth leaf spinaches tend
spinach.
to stick together.
Yeah, they do. And they also rot in those boxes. I'm also trying Pine Tree's spinach mix. I don't know why. I just got conned into trying it. That's all.
They did not con you, they enticed you. There's a difference.
Oh yeah, enticed. Okay. So radishes.
Yeah. So we're not growing any other leaf things besides kale, spinach, and of course lettuce, like we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Radishes. Gotta grow the cherry bell.
Yeah.
And
I grow cherry bell. And I also grow French breakfast, which is one of my favorites. And I really love the Easter egg mixes. And again, Pine Tree enticed me to try the Pine Tree radish mix, which I sowed last week. And we'll see what happens. It's like an Easter egg mix. It's just a mix of little cherry bells and little purple and little white ones. And they're just
pink.
pretty in salads. And pink. That's right, pink. So, and French breakfast is just really pretty, but whatever.
French breakfast is actually my favorite.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
Why?
I think it has a milder taste and I just
It is
like it.
mild. Yeah. Remember that time where we talked about spring, summer, and winter radishes?
I
Remember
do.
that whole episode where we did that? I'm going to go find it for us so we can put it in the
Yeah.
newsletter. So if
You
people didn't hear
do
it,
that.
they can learn about that because, I will. I've done it before. I can find it. I can find anything. I was a legal assistant.
So I'm also going to grow a radish called Purple Rambo because I bought seeds in 2023, but I never sowed them. And when I was cleaning out all my seeds, I thought, you know what? Time to try them. Try them or get rid of them. I'm going to try them.
Remember back in the day when botanical interests gave us all the black radish seeds because they had like billions of them and they didn't sell well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I hated those. I did. They were
It's like,
terrible.
yeah. And then I bought and sought out a variety called Champion because, again, it was on the Dorothy Giles list from 1926.
There you go.
And
Growing
then,
radishes like it was 1926.
exactly. And then I bought French Champion because that's the burpee name, but the picture showed me French breakfast. So I'm hoping that it's the same. So,
Huh. Interesting.
I'm
Okay,
going to grow
on to
those.
turnips. I always wax poetic about turnips from the garden. They are delicious. I have three
They
out
are.
there right now that I'm thinking about harvesting before the snow and eating, just eating. So you're going to grow seven top. I've never grown seven top.
Nor have I.
Don't
Guess
Dorothy
where it's from?
strikes again.
Dorothy strikes again. Dorothy had two. She had Seven Top and White Globe. White Globe is still grown today. So I actually wasn't really going to buy any turnip seeds. And then I thought, well, I'll just try these two. Dorothy says so.
Okay, well, I'm just going to grow white glove purple top because honest to goodness, that is a proven performer here. I've done a lot of the different turnips. I did the Japanese ones last year in spring, tried to do those in pots. It did not go well. I don't know if the pots were too wet. I mean, it sprouted just fine, but it just never would grow. It just sat there. So finally, I pulled them up and stuck a tomato in that pot. So beets, you decided not to grow any.
I put them out there and then I forget to harvest them. And I'm thinking, I'm going to skip the forget to harvest part. I'm going to skip the sowing part and never even get to that part. That
So
makes
I think
sense.
I sowed some last fall and I couldn't tell you what I sowed. I don't remember, but it was probably one of the golden ones because I like those better because they don't bleed when you cook them. So it's just a personal preference. I've grown all the beets over the years. One of my favorite beets of all time is an heirloom called Bull's Blood, which is just the opposite of the golden one because not only is the beet super red and dark, but also the foliage is dark. And of course, you can eat beet greens and turnip greens and other greens. Definitely those two you can eat. I guess you could eat radish greens, but I don't think I'd want to because they're kind of spiky. Anyway, they're delicious cooked, and I used to cook those.
And by the way, radish greens are often included in microgreen mixes. So I have eaten radish greens. They're just fine.
They're fine. They're a little bit not spicy, but they just have a beety taste, I guess. I wonder if radish greens are in there.
I don't know. I did want to say that you're talking about sowing these things now. And I will not contemplate sowing these until probably March the 24th, which is still 8 weeks from my projected
Mhm.
frost free. So I've got some time. And so when you say you're sowing, I will not panic and think that I need to be sowing because I'm still weeks away.
I sew stuff up until the end of February. And my mom, she would always call me and she would say, "What are you doing?" And I'd say, "I'm sowing lettuce." And she would say, "It's too early," as if she knew. And I was like, "Nope, not too early. End of February is just fine." You've got to get crops in here fast enough. And that's why I'm going to save my purple broccoli, the purple broccoli seeds we got from All American Selections. I'm going to save those and start those indoors to do in the fall because I'm already too late. I mean, I could go buy broccoli plants, but that's complicated too because we might get a really bad cold snap and it'd mess with your broccoli unless you covered it. So the spring garden is not the easiest for cold crops in Oklahoma. It's actually easier to do it in the fall and harvest on into winter. But we keep trying.
Rightly or wrongly, that purple broccoli, I winter sowed it. So we shall see what happens.
I bet it's very successful for you. So you got a little teaser for next week.
Well, we were going to talk about onions this week,
Mhm.
but I said that's too much. People can't
Too
absorb
much.
radishes, spinach, kale, beets, turnips, and onions. So onions will be next week.
And in onions, can we also talk about leeks, shallots, and garlic? Let's just do them all
Yes,
together.
yes, we can. We definitely
Yay.
can, Dee, because this is our podcast. We can talk about whatever we want.
The whole family, as
There
it
you
were.
go. I'll do a quote for the book. A classic is a book that has never finished saying what it has to say. And that's by Italo Calvino, The Uses of Literature.
I think that's very true.
That
I
is
mean,
very
look at
true.
To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, people
Yes.
are still reading it. And we just read True Grit for our well-read mom deal. And there was more discussion about True Grit than anything we've read all year, which, by the way, people, that's a great book. All right. So, but that's not what's on our bookshelf. On our bookshelf is one that Carol got called The Hummingbird's Gift Wonder, Beauty, and Renewal on Wings by Cy Montgomery. I do love a
And
little hummingbird.
yes, and I saw this at the bookstore and I thought, that's a nice little book. I'm going to get that. And so Simon Montgomery may seem familiar to our listeners because she is also the author of The Soul of an Octopus, which I read. I went back to my Goodreads in 2017. And
Yeah.
that a lot of people no longer eat calamari after
That's
that episode.
exactly what I was going to say. No one, a lot, I know a lot of people who will not eat octopi anymore. And I was never a big fan anyway. So no, thank
And
you.
and no surprise, I've never eaten it anyway, so I'm not missing out.
Are
So
octopi, are they mammals? I don't know.
no, they're
Oh,
fish.
they're
They're not mammals.
seafood.
They
Okay.
don't bear live anyway.
I haven't
Yeah.
really thought about them. Anyway, back to the little hummingbirds who have eggs, little tiny eggs.
So it's a little gifty book, and I'm holding it up so you can see it's a tiny little book.
Precious.
And it's about two tiny hummingbird orphans and the
Oh,
story of their rehabilitation. And in telling the story, Cy interjects all kinds of interesting information about hummingbirds in many different cultures and how people just because they can almost look like they're hovering in air because they're hovering in air. People thought they
mhm.
were kind of magical because nobody could figure out how they flew.
Like little
So,
helicopters, they fly, little
but
darlings.
when you have two, and she called them little air bubbles, little almost bumblebee size little hummingbird babies, she said that they had to feed them throughout the day, every 20 minutes with fruit flies that they were catching. And
Mm,
of course, they didn't eat at night, but it's like every 20 minutes, the timer would go off. And she said they would have to get these little syringes and feed these little hummingbirds. Um,
wow.
and then this, the whole story, and I won't spoil the ending to tell you what happens, but I did read this part. And so the rehab person's name is Brenda. And she says, a film Brenda loaned me claimed that a person claimed, so I don't know if this is true, that a person
Mhm.
as active as a hummingbird would need 1,550,000 calories a day. The human's body temperature would rise to 700 degrees Fahrenheit and ignite. To fuel the furious pace of its life, even resting, the hummingbird breathes 250 times a minute and its heart pounds at 500 beats per minute. They must daily visit 1,500 flowers and eat 600 to 700 insects. If the nectar alone were converted to its human equivalent, that would be 15 gallons a day.
Wow.
So,
You know who loves hummingbirds?
who?
Sharon Lovejoy, who's our friend and listener, and she will love this segment because she takes pictures of their little nests.
Uh huh.
And I mean, she has quite a few of them. I have a lot in my garden too. Do you have a lot of hummingbirds?
I do. And I don't have a hummingbird feeder. Now, my neighbor next
I
door
don't
has
either.
had one, and you will see them coming to the salvias. And that's why I buy those big annual salvias like the skyscraper series
Hmm. Yeah.
because they will come and they will eat off those. And I was thinking the other day, and kind of after reading this, there are 5 containers on my patio. And I thought, you know what? I'm putting big salvias in all of those.
I
And
think you had
those
to last year.
containers, I'm going to do all just like these containers are for the hummingbirds.
Yeah, and you know what? They love coral honeysuckle too. And they also love Bignonia capreolata, which is not trumpet vine. It's the cross vine. Both of those plants, when they're in bloom down in my garden, and those are both natives, both of those plants in my garden are big, big hummingbird plants. They also love false vervain, which takes us back sort of to verbena, but they love false vervain and they're always around all of those, especially the red ones, although they'll drink out of other colors too. But I have a post on my blog about 10 plants that they love.
Well, we'll link to that. We'll link to that with the book link. The other thing I was going to say is up the greenhouse, they have a big container by their entrance to where you go to pay. And they always
Mhm.
plant all kinds of salvia and stuff in there. And they've got some hummingbird feeders. And you can stand there, and the hummingbirds are like, they are used to the people and they will just come and feed. And you can stand there and just watch hummingbirds come and go. And it's really, really nice.
I thought that the hummingbirds in California were a lot less shy than the hummingbirds here. Of course, if you have a feeder up, the boys just fight each other all day.
Yeah.
And the thing is if you are, I choose not to feed them with a feeder just because, well, I just do.
Ants.
And so, yeah, ants are part of the problem. Honeybees get into it. It just becomes a lot. So I do it with plants and I have lots and lots of hummingbirds. And the funny thing is if you really watch them, if you're very, very still and watch them out in the garden, they will go sit on a branch once in a while. And that's really exciting to see.
Yes. And it is a fascinating book, and it's just, and you will like it. It has
I
a good
will.
ending. Let's just say it has a good ending. And the hummingbirds that they were rehabbing were Allen's hummingbirds, they're called, which I don't think
Mm-hmm.
exist here. And then
Mm-hmm.
the aggressive ones that also are this takes place in California. The aggressive ones are called Anna's hummingbirds.
Interesting.
And
I don't know anything about that. That's cool.
I didn't either. So the other thing that I was going to say is if people read this book and think, oh, I'll rehab some hummingbirds. Let me just say, in most states, it is not legal to rehab wild creatures without being certified. Or I checked Indiana and you have to be permitted to be a wildlife rehabber. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people, I saw one that says bats only. This guy's a bat rehabber. And so you need to get a permit, and it takes a bit of training because you don't want somebody rehabbing like rabid raccoons or, you
Well, and
want
it's just
these.
hard to rehab birds, period. I
It
mean,
is.
it
It
is
is.
really, really hard because we've had birds, you know, fall out of their nests and all that stuff out here, and it is not easy to rehab them. So that reminds me of the book we read a while back called The Bluebird Effect. And it
Yes.
was about rehabbing birds too, among other things. So, anything else you want to say about this lovely little book?
No, I just want to say it's The Hummingbird's Gift, Wonder, Beauty, and Renewal on Wings by Cy Montgomery. And it came out, I don't think it's been out forever. Let me have a look quick to see. This book came out in da da da. Cue the music. 2021. So it's been out for a few years, but it's well worth it.
Well, the problem was everything that came out in 2020 and 2021 sometimes didn't come out until later because, they're printed. Some of them were printed in China, some of them they just had trouble getting them printed here. It was just complicated. So, I'm not surprised that it's now on the bookshelf. I feel
Yeah.
like we
And
missed a couple of years in books. So, you want me to do the next quote?
yeah, I was looking to see where this was printed. Yeah, you can go ahead and do the next quote.
It is not how much we have, but how much we enjoy that makes happiness. Charles Spurgeon. The dirt this week you found one
Two
piece of
pieces of
it.
dirt. Yeah,
We have
two
two
pieces
pieces
of
of dirt.
dirt.
It's a double dirt day.
So there is now, we used to be able to say there are no GMO vegetables on the market for home gardeners. That is no longer true. There is now a GMO tomato available to the home gardener from a place called Norfolk Healthy Products. This thing
Mhm.
is purple and has
It's so
more of the,
purple.
and I'll quote from their website, the purple color reflects the increased antioxidant content and presents a beautiful color and contrast on the plate with a deep tomato taste. And they did gene, whatever they do,
Splicing. Mhm.
splicing with snapdragons in order to increase the amount of antioxidants and get a purpler taste. And so, interestingly, this was developed in the UK, it looks like, near Norwich in the UK,
Right?
but it's being marketed in the United States. The FDA has approved it. And
Of
the
course they have.
United States is the only place where you can buy this GMO tomato seed. And I'm just going to say that the seeds, if you look at that website, are $20 for a packet of 10.
Hmm. No
And
thanks.
it will come true from seed, it sounds like, but you're not allowed to obviously sell those seeds to anybody else. And
Right.
so I will just say ours is not to judge, but to present.
Okay, we presented. Moving on. All right, our next piece of dirt is you and I are going to help with an event as room monitors for a breakout session of the Book Authors Talk Gardening. It's sponsored by the National Garden Bureau, and it's on March 7th at 7 p.m. on Zoom. It's a free event.
It is
I said it's
free. And
Zoom.
It is Zoom. You can register and you'll hear the authors talk. And there's going to be Jenny Rose Carey, who wrote The Ultimate Flower Lover's Guide, Jeff
Mhm.
Rugg, who wrote Greener View Gardening, Lorraine Johnson, who wrote A Northern Gardener's Guide to Native Plants and Pollinators, and Noelle Johnson, who wrote Dry Climate Gardening. And I don't know if you attended last fall, Dee, but they'll have a lot of question and answer with these authors. And then before the end, you can hit a button and say, I want to go into a room with, for example, I'm going to be the room monitor for Lorraine Johnson. I want to go into Lorraine's room, and then we can all be in there, and you'll be on the camera, or you can turn your camera off if you want. You can ask questions. They'll give more information. And so it's just a really nice event and a way to find out about some great gardening books.
Yeah, and I was in Jenny Rose Carey's garden last fall because I went to the Bloggers Fling, and it was in outside of, well, it was in Pennsylvania, and her garden's there, and we were in there, and it was a wonderful day, and we had the best time even though it was raining, and she was a gracious and wonderful hostess. And then Noelle, I've been on many trips with over the years, and so have you, and she gardens out of Arizona, and nobody knows more about dry climate gardening than Noelle. I don't know the other, well, I know Lorraine, but I don't know Jeff, so this will be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, we'll put a link in the show notes, a link on our newsletter. That is Book Authors Talk Gardening, sponsored by the National Garden Bureau, March 7th, 7 p.m. Free.
It's free and fun. So, and what else are you going to be doing on March 7th at that time? You won't be gardening, so go.
That's right.
All right, so you're going to do the next quote.
The lesson I have thoroughly learned and wish to pass on to others is to know the enduring happiness that the love of a garden gives. Gertrude Jekyll.
Yep. Go, Gertrude.
Go, Gertrude.
She's why we all plant with such abundant color, because that was her thing. All right, so rabbit holes. I have been down the Zinnia Rabbit Hole Express. It's not just a rabbit hole. It's a giant cavern with many, many, many rooms. I wrote a blog post about them and I did a reel. And then I went and read Margaret Roach's article discussion with Don Tipping of Siskiyou Seeds. And Siskiyou Seeds has a lot of really innovative varieties of a lot of different things, from vegetables to flowers and herbs. But of course, he had some zinnias. And I actually went and bought 2 more packets, which I'm laughing because I already had 32 packets. 32. So I don't even, it's ridiculous. That's what it is.
Well, and we used to talk about my violas like that was ridiculous. I think zinnias, you've really taught me 100%.
I've taken them to a whole new level. But his seeds were $5 a packet. I just want to point that out because several people, there's a certain famous person online who is releasing some of her beautiful, beautiful seeds. And I can't tell you how many people private messaged me on Instagram and said, I read your blog post and you didn't buy any seeds. Carol, why didn't I buy any of those prized, gorgeous seeds?
Because prices range from $15.95 to $17.95 to $19.95 per packet,
which was 25 to 50 seeds. And I said, I just can't do it. So I didn't. And a lot of other people will. And I can't wait to see them bloom. And so I went over here, and the seed packets that I bought, I actually bought one for myself and one for Jennifer. And they're a cactus type with unusual colors. And I didn't have that. So, of course I needed it. What was your rabbit hole?
So my rabbit hole was, of course, another lost lady of garden writing, Kate L. Brewster. And so I'm laughing. It's kind of, I didn't know this when I put the Gertrude Jekyll quote up there. Kate actually went to England and visited with Gertrude Jekyll, as one does.
Well, of course she did, because Kate was rich. Kate was a mover and a shaker.
Well, she was one of the original members of the Garden Club of America. And for 6 years, she edited their bulletin.
Yep.
And then out of nowhere, that little garden series, she writes The Little Garden for Little Money, which is hilarious because
right?
Kate had a 25-acre garden in Lake Forest, Illinois. Kate had a townhome in Chicago on Lakeview Avenue.
Mm.
Kate had, in the 1930 census, Kate had a butler, a chauffeur, a cook, and 3 maids. And then the property in Lake Forest has been subdivided. And I was reading a blog post and I wondered, does she have a gardener?
Of course. How many gardeners did she have?
I don't know, because unless they were listed in a census report, I wouldn't have any idea. But
Mhm.
it was noted that the gardener's cottage on the estate has been remodeled and they had added a whole bunch of stuff to it. So I know there was a cottage for the gardener.
Mhm.
And then down in that rabbit hole of Kate, 2 other things very quickly. I found the Rome Prize. And you remember we talked about Four Seasons in Rome by Anthony Doerr, and where he
Mhm.
went to study in Rome and he wrote All the Light You Cannot See. He went to Rome on a 1-year study for this Rome Prize.
Mhm.
And there's a Rome Prize for landscape architecture that is Kate Brewster's name. It's named for her.
She's amazing. I read so we should say that you have a Substack newsletter where you are talking
Just,
about all of these
yes.
famous people. Okay, so I'm going to connect something back to last week. Remember CZ? What was CZ's last name?
CZ Guest.
CZ Guest. Okay, so that night after we recorded, Bill and I sat down to watch Feud, Truman and the Swans, or Truman versus the Swans. And up pops CZ in
Yeah.
this show, right?
Yeah.
Which we kind of discussed. But it's not like a small part. Like every time they show CZ in the show, she's gardening. She's out in her garden clipping stuff. And then on
Yes.
top of that, Babe Haley, who was married to Bill Haley, she was a gardener too. And that's how she and CZ became friends. And so this is all interwoven through that show. And I was like, I know those people because Carol has been researching them. And it was cool to see her because she's blonde. And she was actually the only one who talked to Truman after his terrible faux pas. But
Yes.
I,
CZ. Yeah.
CZ was so cool. You know, she was a horseback rider. And of course, she got hurt. And so that's why she really devoted time to her garden. But she still bred horses and she was just a cool person. And I think
Yeah.
Kate would have liked CZ.
And so Kate died in 1947. CZ's
Mhm.
prime she wrote her book, I think, in the 1970s.
70s. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so she also had a garden column. She is on my list to do a whole Substack article about CZ Guest. And like I said, our friend Kathy Jentz got her book, First Gardens. And you can, if you have newspapers.com subscription, you can go
I
out
used
and read
to.
all her garden columns called Garden Talk. The ones that are online are from the Miami Herald, which makes me think that she had a Florida
She
garden.
probably had, yeah, CZ was very wealthy. She was as wealthy as Babe, I think. Although Babe was unbelievably wealthy. One interesting thing about Babe, other than she was a pretty darn good gardener, is that she had tons of jewelry, like so much jewelry, because every time there was an indiscretion on her husband's part, she'd get a big chunky piece of jewelry or a piece of original art. And right before she died, because she got cancer and eventually died, right before she died, she started giving away all of her jewelry to all of her girlfriends, which I loved because that meant that her jewelry didn't get to the next Mrs. Paley if there was one. Do you see?
I
She
do.
was
I do.
Babe controlled every aspect of her life. She was like the perfect hostess. And so
But
anyway, I just love CZ because she's kind of a horsey, gardeny woman. I
yes,
like
so
her.
I will say this. I will say this, going back to Kate. I found other articles where it looks like she and her husband spent winters in Hawaii in the 30s.
Of course they did.
And I'm thinking, well, in the 30s, how would you have gotten to Hawaii from Chicago? They didn't fly in the 30s, did they? There wasn't. She would have had to take a
But
train and then a boat.
yeah, she probably took a ship. I don't know.
Anyway, she was quite wealthy, and it's ironic that her book, which she wanted to call The Foolproof Garden, ended up being The Little Garden for Little Money because Kate had more money than anybody.
More
Because
money
there's
than
the other
God.
thing. She and her husband helped start the Chicago Art Institute.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
collected Picasso's and Cezanne paintings. And if you
Mhm.
go, there's another, I don't know whether it was the Smithsonian website, but all her correspondence related to acquiring and selling art is out
Mhm.
there on that website. Anyway, so I did write a blog.
Amazing.
I wrote a blog post this morning because she has quite a bit to say about labeling plants in your garden. And I'll
She
just
was
say
big
that.
on it.
Oh, she was big on it. And I quoted her. And so that was my blog post this morning over on my blog. But anyway, Kate Brewster, I'm going to park her for a while because I got another one to go on to next week.
It's amazing how many of them you've found and how you've brought them to light. Good for you. Applause.
Thank you. I got applause twice today.
You did. Garden commissions. Mine is plant more seeds. I've got more to do, and there's just nothing more fun than planting seeds right now. Do more work outside, maybe before the snow, but I doubt it. We're supposed to get snow on Sunday because tomorrow I have an Alpha Gal conference, which is on Zoom. If anybody wants a link to it, just message me or text me on Instagram or something.
Well, by the time this comes out, they won't be able to.
Oh, that's right. It'll be over. Never mind. I always forget about that. And then I'm also just going to watch for beautiful new things springing up. I see all of my little iris reticulatas sending up their little sharp leaves out of the ground right now. And that's, signs of spring. It's coming, even in spite of snow.
So in my world, today's Friday, the 9th. So cooler weather is
Yep.
coming after today's big high of 60. It's going to get cooler and more wintry again. Lows down into the 20s at night. So everybody's going to calm down. I will do a bit more cleanup. I think I'm going to cut back some more epimediums because they get in the way of all that dead foliage gets in the way of the pretty spring blooms. And then I'll probably
Mhm.
just sit back because, I'm not as far along as you are. And I'll just watch crocuses pop up here and there and shiver in the cold and look for snowdrops. They're all blooming and look for that first winter aconite. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, we've got some pictures to take, so we should wrap this up.
All right. Thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist, at substack.com, also linked to in our show notes. If you do, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a whole day early.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.